Hello friends, it is March the 25th of 2022. This video is about the importance of metal magazines. Growing up, I started to read metal magazines when I was in my early teens, and that was the way that I largely discovered metal music. I'm 35 years old now, so yeah, a lot of the young people growing up now more than likely would not discover metal music through reading metal magazines. They would more than likely discover it from various metal websites, social media, and different video platforms such as YouTube. But when I was growing up, the internet was still in its infancy, and yeah, so I mostly just discovered metal music through reading different magazines. Whenever I go to a grocery store or to the mall or to a bookstore of some sort, I would look through the various metal magazines there, and I would purchase some of them, and I did that quite regularly for several years, and I discovered metal music that way. Discovered a lot of great bands through reading these magazines, and discovered so much about metal, the history and all the different genres and whatnot. And so yeah, it was a very important time in my life, and yeah, I just think it's something that's just so incredible, metal magazines, and unfortunately it's not really that popular anymore. But I still enjoy reading metal magazines. Unfortunately, a lot of them have disappeared, and it's tragic in my opinion, but that's just the way it is, unfortunately. But things change, obviously. But yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and discuss a variety of these different metal magazines, and I'm going to show you some of them as well. Okay, so let's get right into this. Okay, so the first magazine that I'm going to discuss is Revolver. Revolver has been around for a long time. They've been around since 2000. It's an American magazine. It's definitely more of a commercial or mainstream type of magazine. Features more of the popular bands. A lot of hard rock stuff in here, but of course quite a bit of metal as well as punk and hardcore. Yeah, pretty good magazine, I think. Not the greatest in my opinion, but I still think it's a fairly good magazine. Very accessible, very easy to read, definitely geared more towards younger people. So yeah, and I did read this magazine for many years. I did subscribe to it for quite a long time, and yeah, I still think it's a fairly good magazine. Okay, so that is Revolver. The next magazine that I'm going to discuss is Decibel. All right, these are some recent issues of Decibel. Decibel has been around for a long time as well. They are an American magazine. They formed back in 2004. Pretty good magazine, very metal, that's for sure. They feature more of the extreme bands and more of the underground bands. Lots of death metal and black metal and doom metal in here. Yeah, excellent stuff. They feature lots of in-depth coverage on bands, lots of very interesting types of articles. Okay, so yeah, I'd say it's a pretty good quality metal magazine. Okay, yeah, so that is Decibel. Okay, the next magazine that I'm going to discuss is Metal Hammer. Okay, here's an issue of Metal Hammer right here. All right, Metal Hammer is from the UK. Metal Hammer has been around for a long time, since 1983, so it's quite a long time. And yeah, I never really got into Metal Hammer all that much. I think it's a fairly good quality magazine, maybe a bit more commercial, but they do feature quite a bit of the underground stuff as well, but a bit more on the commercial side. But I still think it's a fairly good quality magazine. Like I said, I never really got into it all that much. Never really appealed to me a whole lot, but I know a lot of people enjoy it. I mean, it's been around for quite a long time, so it must have a pretty good solid fan base. Okay, so that is Metal Hammer. The next magazine that I will discuss is Kerrang. Kerrang is from the UK as well. Kerrang has been around since 1981. They still exist. I never got into Kerrang. I can't really comment on it a whole lot. I know a lot of people are big fans of Kerrang. I think it's a bit more varied. They feature more of like hard rock as well as metal, obviously, and as well as hardcore and punk and metalcore and all that kind of stuff. So it's a bit more varied, bit more commercial maybe. I never really appealed to me. I never really bought a single issue of Kerrang, to be honest. It just never really appealed to me a whole lot. I know people are really into it, but if you're like a die-hard metal guy, it might not really appeal to one that is just strictly a metalhead. Like I said, it's a bit more varied. You're going to get a lot of the punk and hardcore stuff in there. But yeah, I still think it's probably a fairly decent magazine. I don't really know. I can't really comment a whole lot on it. But yeah, that's Kerrang. Okay, so next magazine is Terrorizer. Terrorizer is one of my favorites. Here's a couple of issues. I subscribed to Terrorizer for many years and was a huge fan of it. Yeah, so Terrorizer is from the UK. They formed in 1993. And their final issue was in June of 2018. Unfortunately, they went out of business. It was such a good quality metal magazine. The best in my opinion. I still think Terrorizer was the best metal magazine that ever came out. I just always look forward to reading the new issue of Terrorizer. Every month I was just so excited whenever it came in the mail. Initially I just bought it from the bookstore, but then I subscribed to it. It was a little bit pricey because I'm from Canada. So it does cost a fair bit when you're ordering stuff from the UK or other parts of the world. But yeah, I always enjoyed Terrorizer. Just a good, solid metal magazine. Lots of death metal and black metal and doom metal and folk metal. Just a nice variety of different metal stuff. Lots of European metal bands and lots of underground stuff. Lots of great articles. Very well written. Just a very appealing metal magazine. Just very good looking. Lots of great pictures. Yeah, good stuff. Unfortunately, it's no longer around. Was saddened by the fact that it had that they had ended, that they had went out of business. But fortunately, that's the way it is now. But great magazine. Okay, so that is Terrorizer. The next magazine that I will discuss is Zero Tolerance. There's a couple issues right here. As you can see, it's a bit of a smaller magazine. Okay, Zero Tolerance is another magazine from out of the UK. First issue was in 2004. They're still around. I think they publish just bi-monthly. It's a pretty good magazine, actually. Very metal, kind of similar to Terrorizer. Lots of underground stuff, lots of death metal and black metal and doom metal and all that stuff. Yeah, good variety of stuff. Lots of great articles. Yeah, I think it's a pretty good magazine. If you like Terrorizer, I think that's a good kind of similar magazine to Terrorizer. And yeah, I think it's pretty good. I think Zero Tolerance is a quality metal magazine. Okay. All right, so yeah, that is Zero Tolerance. Okay, the next magazine that I will discuss is one right here. This is Rock-A-Rolla. This is another magazine out of the UK. They founded in 2005 and their final issue was in 2016. They feature more kind of like experimental or alternative type rock and metal and punk bands. Yeah, lots of experimental stuff in here. Definitely appeals to more of that crowd. Interesting stuff though. I think it was a pretty good magazine, well written, lots of great articles, a quality magazine, that's for sure. Yeah, I think it's pretty good. Unfortunately, they're no longer around, but like I said, that's just the way it is now. Okay, so that is Rock-A-Rolla. The next magazine that I will discuss is Hip Raider. This magazine was founded in 1942. Obviously, weren't a metal magazine when they first started, but they transitioned into that, I believe, sometime in the 1980s. Not the best quality magazine in my opinion. Very commercial. Featured mostly just very popular bands. Not a horrible magazine, decent I would say. Definitely geared more towards very young people. Not the best written magazine. The articles weren't necessarily that engaging or interesting. Decent though. Certainly worth reading, especially if you're or were a young person growing up then. But yeah, I mean, I did buy some issues of it, but like I said, they went out of business and I can understand why. But yeah, that's Hip Raider. Okay, so Circus is the next magazine that I will discuss. Here's a couple issues right here. Circus is was a magazine out of the US. They formed back in 1966. Again, weren't a metal magazine obviously when they first started, but gravitated into one, I believe, sometime during the 1970s or 1980s. Again, similar to Hip Raider, not a quality magazine, not the best written magazine. Featured mostly just very popular bands. Decent magazine, great for very young people. Like I said, not the best quality stuff. I mean, I can understand why they went out of business, and they did go out of business in 2006. decent magazine, but like I said, it's, yeah, it just wasn't the greatest. Okay, so that's Circus. Okay, next magazine is Metal Maniacs. I don't actually have any copies of this magazine. I did purchase some years ago, but they must have got thrown out at some point. This was a magazine out of the US, formed back in 1989, and their final issue was in 2009. Decent magazine, I think. It featured a lot of more underground bands, lots of very extreme stuff. I think it was a fairly good magazine. Not the greatest, but still fairly good. Okay, so that was Metal Maniacs. The next one that I will mention is Metal Edge. That magazine was out of the US as well. They formed back in 1985. And their final issue was in 2009. I did purchase some issues of Metal Edge at one particular point. They must have got thrown out at some point. Metal Edge was a little bit more commercial, kind of similar to Metal Maniacs, I suppose, but more on the commercial side, featured more of the mainstream type bands. Decent magazine, not great, not the best magazine. Decent though, worth buying. Yeah, but I mean, I can understand why they didn't last. But they were around for quite a long time though. But yeah, Metal Edge. Okay, so the next magazine that I will mention is Brave Words and Bloody Knuckles. Got a couple issues right here. Okay, this is a magazine out of Toronto. They formed back in 1994. Their final print issue was in 2009. Now they are only online. So they are still around, but it's just online. They don't print paper copies anymore. Pretty good magazine, actually. I think fairly good. Not the best, but I think it's a pretty good magazine. Very metal, lots of underground bands, lots of in-depth coverage. Yeah, I'd say it's a pretty good magazine. Pretty solid metal magazine. Okay, so that is Brave Words and Bloody Knuckles. Okay, and another one that I will mention briefly. I don't have a whole lot of information on it, but that is Iron Fist. Got a few copies right there. This magazine, unfortunately, was only around for maybe 2-3 years. I don't know how long they were around necessarily, but good magazine. I really liked Iron Fist. Very underground. They featured more of the old school heavy metal type of bands. It was definitely geared more towards more veteran, old school heavy metal kind of guys. Yeah, just a very, very metal magazine. Yeah, just a solid metal magazine. Unfortunately, I don't know what happened, but to me, in my opinion, that was definitely one of the best metal magazines that has ever been around. I was definitely saddened by the fact that they went out of business, but unfortunately, that's what happens, right? So yeah, that is Iron Fist. Okay, and I will mention a few other magazines. One of them is Guitar World. Okay, here's a couple issues right there. I subscribed to Guitar World for many years. I mean, obviously not a metal magazine necessarily, but does feature a lot of metal bands and does have a lot of great write-ups of metal bands and obviously metal guitarists. So yeah, I mean, growing up I discovered a lot of great metal bands through reading guitar magazines. So guitar magazines are a great way of discovering metal bands as well. Not the greatest way of discovering metal bands, but I still, like I said, discovered quite a few great bands through reading guitar magazines. Another great one was Guitar One. So yeah, I did discover quite a few bands through reading Guitar One as well. Guitar One is no longer around. Guitar World is still producing magazines. So yeah, that is just some of the metal magazines that have existed or still exist. There are other ones I could mention, but those are quite a few of them actually. Yeah, unfortunately, things have been changing. Metal magazines aren't really that popular anymore. Some of them still exist. And so yeah, a lot of young people now, and just people in general, even people that are older, are discovering metal music through various online sites like Metal Injection, Loudwire, Blabbermouth, Metal Storm, and Metal Sex, just to name a few sites. Also, YouTube channels are a great way of discovering metal bands. Also, social media like Facebook and Instagram are great ways of discovering metal bands. And yeah, I mean, obviously the times are changing and have been changing for some time, but yeah, I mean, I still appreciate metal magazines, and I know so many other people appreciate them still. And yeah, there's just something beautiful about metal magazines. You just feel this sort of connection with the music and the scene just through reading them, and there's just something magical about it. I just can't explain it exactly, but yeah, I just love it so much. Okay, so that is my discussion of metal magazines. Like I said, I just love metal magazines so much. Growing up reading them, and yeah, it was just such a special time in my life buying those magazines and subscribing to them, and I still love metal magazines. I still read some of them, and like I said, unfortunately the times have changed, and metal magazines just aren't really that popular anymore. But I mean, I understand things change obviously, and it is what it is. Okay, so let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about metal magazines, and let me know what some of your favorite metal magazines are. Okay, so leave some comments. I really appreciate if people would leave some comments. And yeah, I want to say thank you very much for watching, and I want to say thanks to all the people who watch my videos and subscribe to my channel. I really truly appreciate it. Okay, so take care, my friends. Cheers.